In the previous broadcast, I was speaking about the new covenant that is described in Jeremiah chapter 31 between verse 31 and 34. And it reads, "Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt, my covenant which they broke, though I was a husband to them, says the Lord. But this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says the Lord. I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. No more shall every man teach his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they all shall know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, says the Lord, for I will forgive their iniquity, and their sin I will remember no more." And the importance of the previous broadcast was to describe the reality that here it is clear that a new covenant would be established, that there was an old covenant that was established, and that there will be a new covenant that is going to be established at another time. And this covenant is not going to be like the old one. In verse 32, he said, "Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt." It is going to be a very different covenant, and we should not look at this in the context of necessarily the old in any other way except to be able to contrast between the two. And there is a tremendous amount of fulfillment and foreshadowing that is also presented in the Old Covenant, but it is important to realize that it is very clear here that the Lord conveys very specifically that this covenant is going to be a different one. And I was explaining that one of the important aspects of the new covenant is that He is going to effectively change our minds. He is going to change our hearts. He's going to make a change within our minds and within our hearts such that it will make a complete transformation of who we are. Instead of being so consumed with trying to live in obedience to a law that we could not possibly live in obedience to, the Lord has provided a new covenant such that He would change our hearts and change our minds, and so that it would have a fundamental change in our entire being, so that as we begin to engage the world around us, it will change us in such a way that we will probably not go out and be violating our neighbor. And this is revealed through this particular passage, and it is also revealed in the New Testament. And in this particular program, I would like to go ahead and explore the New Testament reference and quotation of this very passage, of this very prophecy. And this is found in Hebrews chapter 8. And I will return in just 1 minute and address this in more detail.
We asked Jim to tell us how Pastor Aaron Budjen's teaching at By Grace Fellowship has benefited him.
I am 72. During my lifetime, I've been with 6 different denominations. Aaron Budjen has taught me many things I never heard previously. Aaron brings a clear description of the gospel using his Jewish background. I have received clear teaching on the finality of the cross, the reality of the resurrection, law and grace, and the real truth about tithing and baptism. Aaron teaches on a verse-by-verse basis with clear examples and application. His teaching has blessed me tremendously. Come to By Grace Fellowship and learn a new understanding of grace and truth.
By Grace Fellowship meets in the YMCA in Denver at Highway 285 in Sheridan on Sunday mornings from 9:30 to 10:30 and 10:45 to 11:30, or subscribe to Aaron's weekly messages. For more information, call 303-359-2550. That's 303-359-2550.
There are many fundamental differences between the Old and the New Covenant, but probably the most important fundamental difference to me is most certainly when he says that we would know our God. You see, with the Old Covenant, there was never any provision, there was never any commandment, there was never any ordinance, there was never any part of the law that had anything to do with actually knowing our God. But this new covenant that he has established has provided us with some means, with some opportunity, so that we could actually know him, to know him in a very personal and deep way. Before, we could know him a little bit just in context of the things that he said, the things that he did, the things that were important to him as he expressed those things as being important to him. And that is a way of knowing a little bit about your God, and you can certainly learn an awful lot about him. But there would still be no real depth of really knowing who he is and experiencing a really strong and real personal relationship with him. You see, to experience that, then you would have to encounter and enjoy the character that he has for you. And there are several attributes of his particular character, and these are some very important attributes to understand and be aware of, and they really do have an important impact on our lives, and they will have a continued impact on our lives as we begin to engage the world around us on the basis of how it is that he treats us and how it is that he relates to us. And it's vitally important to realize this. For example, part of his character is most certainly that he is perfect love and that he is perfect acceptance. And the love that he has for us is perfect patience and kindness and goodness and gentleness. And the acceptance that he has for us, the complete and absolute perfect acceptance that he has for us, is in the midst of our sinfulness. It is in the midst of who we are and where we are that he will consider to still dwell with us, to still live with us, and still be an active participant in our daily lives, whereas if he was not accepting us, then he most certainly would not be an active participant in our lives. And so these are some very important characteristics and some very important issues, and there was never any opportunity in the law to be able to experience and enjoy these attributes and these characteristics that he has made available to us now in the new covenant. There was no way that you could ever truly be loved and accepted by your God. Consider acceptance, for example. You could never really be accepted by God because the acceptance that was presented in the Old Covenant was clearly a very conditional acceptance. If you obeyed, then he would accept you. And if you did not obey, then he would reject you. And that is the law, and that is the purity of the law. And you cannot just give it your best effort. This is not about your best effort. Do you really think that your best effort is going to be impressive to the living God of the universe when he has clearly given his commandments and he has clearly given the standard by which we are to live by and by which you are to be accepted or not accepted? That is the issue. And if you consider trying to live a life in obedience to the law, then you are considering to live a life of complete vanity, of trying to live a life that you cannot possibly live, to obtain or to earn or to acquire the love and acceptance of God that you can never obtain in that particular way. It is completely useless. It is completely useless in that regard. It is completely useless if you are going to try and use it for that purpose and in that way. But this is not the purpose for the law. This is not why God gave the law. God gave the law very specifically to show us that we were sinful. It was given in order to provide you with clear and absolute evidence that you could not be like God and that you could never obtain or even sustain your right standing with him, and that you would have no hope whatsoever but to rest in and trust in and hope for the mercy and the grace that he would eventually provide, and that is what he did provide when he instituted the new covenant. Now, when the new covenant went into effect, it was not given so that we could find a new way to now live in obedience to the law. Now, most certainly, the expression of the changed life will be a life that is no longer sinning against our neighbor, at least not to the extent that we saw before. We are always going to be struggling with sin, but we do not then turn to the law and now give it our best effort with hopes that perhaps the Lord has provided us with some renewed energy of some kind or some renewed methodologies or some new approach that we can now pursue obedience to the law, because still, if you're focusing on that, then you're still going to be totally consumed with trying to live a life that you cannot live, and you are still never really going to know his perfect love for you. Until you come to the end of yourself and rest in and trust in and realize that you are totally hopeless, and that there is no hope outside of the love and acceptance that he has available to you, until you rest in that reality, then you will never be able to enjoy, you will never be able to appreciate, you will never be able to really live in the reality of the new relationship that you truly already have. It is so vitally important to rest in this. It is so vitally important to trust in this, because once you have, this is the kind of change that you will experience in your life and in your heart. You will be fulfilled. The deepest longings of your heart, the deepest needs of your heart will be fulfilled, and that will provide a tremendous change. If you are not so consumed with trying to obtain from someone else what they cannot possibly give, then it will set you free to be able to relate to them in a very different way, not on the basis of what you are trying to obtain, but on the basis of what it is that you can give. And what can you give? You can give what it is that you have received from the Lord if you would only deeply know Him, if you would only know how much He loves you, if you would only know how much He truly accepts you. And if you are still consumed with your attempted obedience, if you are still consumed with your pursuit of trying to live a life that you cannot live, then you will never be able to stop long enough to enjoy the love that He truly has for you. So let me go ahead and move on, and let me read the reference in Hebrews chapter 8. In Hebrews chapter 8, beginning in verse 1, now this is the main point of the things we are saying. We have such a high priest who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle which the Lord erected and not man. For every high priest is appointed to offer both gifts and sacrifices, therefore it is necessary that this one also, having something to offer, for if he were on earth, he would not be a priest, since there are priests who offer the gifts according to the law, who serve the copy and shadow of the heavenly things, as Moses was divinely instructed when he was about to make the tabernacle. For he said, "See that you make all things according to the pattern shown you on the mountain." But now he has obtained a more excellent ministry, inasmuch as he is also mediator of a better covenant, which was established on better promises. For if the first covenant had been faultless, then no place would have been sought for a second, because finding fault with them, he says, and then he goes on and he quotes the passage in Jeremiah.